Greetings, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our special community call. It's the Azure Apps and Infrastructure Community Call on reserved instances. My name is Jeff Wagner. I'm going to be your moderator for today's call. We're going to have Rob Seller do some discussion here and go over some slides. Rob is a member of our global black belt team. So without further delay, I'm actually going to turn it right over to Rob. And if you could introduce yourself and get things started, that would be awesome. Thanks, man.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Let me change the presentation here. I'll crank up the video. And can you guys hear me and see me all right?
Yes to both. Looks good.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Rob Sellers. As Jeff said, I'm part of the global black belt team here at Microsoft. And my role, I'm an Azure deal strategist, and I work with our teams to understand the Azure programs and work with them to develop solutions for our customers, to compelling proposals, if you will. So have been helping with the rollout of the reserved instances, and I'm pleased to talk to you about that today. I've got about 14 slides, I think, that I'll cover. I will try to pay attention to the questions in the IM window. But if you have a question, feel free just to interrupt me, or I will certainly leave questions there for the end. Alrighty, Jeff, thank you for muting everybody. This slide's not about, I'm not going to talk long about this, other than to say, hey, the cloud, if you didn't know it, and if you haven't seen this slide before, the cloud is a big business. It's a big business now, and it's just growing at an incredible rate. So for the last 2 years, Azure's growth rate that we report earnings on the street has been 100%, right? So it's doubling every year. And when you look at this addressable market, the landscape out there is just an amazing opportunity for us. And it's because of this that, and this is a slide that if you've seen the materials, you've not seen this, this is why we're going to talk about reserved instances today. Right, and if you don't take anything away other than this is, hey, we're trying to help our customers, and we want you to help our customers understand how to lower their Azure costs. Right? That's not something you hear very much from Microsoft, right? We want to help them optimize and lower their Azure costs because we know what will happen is consumption's going to go up. Right? They have so much pent-up demand. The majority of our customers that if they have started their journey to the cloud, they're only 15 or 20% migrated. Most of their applications are still on-premise or in colos. And so we want to accelerate that. And we think by leveraging programs like reserved instance and the hybrid use benefit, which lower their cost, that will incent them to move even faster. So that's the why we're talking about reserved instances. I'm going to go through some of the details of the program, and if you just had one slide to talk about reserved instances, this would probably be it, right? And so we have had in the market for the last 18 months compute pre-purchase, which we're essentially replacing with our reserved instances program, right? And this is where customers can commit to VMs in advance. We've listened to a lot of customer feedback, especially around CPP, which was not very flexible. And so we've designed what we believe to be a flexible program, and I'm going to talk about that in greater detail. So the new program has 1 and 3 year terms. A big change from compute pre-purchase is that now it deducts from monetary commit. So if you have an EA customer that made a monetary commitment up front in the past, CPP didn't work, which basically meant that customer that might have given us $100,000 didn't have access to what was our most attractive pricing. And now they will, because now they can purchase reserved instances. They're going to procure them themselves out talk about that, and pay for it essentially out of their monetary commit. This is a public program that replaces CPP. So by public, Compute Prepurchase was a special program. They couldn't go on the website to get pricing or really details. They had to work with Microsoft and or our reseller channel to get pricing, to prepare a price sheet, to place an order. It was cumbersome, not a lot of fun. Reserved instances, everyone can see. You can go to azure.com right now, and you can go bring up one of the calculators. I'll show this to you later, and you can see reserved instance pricing. Same thing our customers can do, and they can see it in their portal. So they can see, based on the workloads they're running today, what is the on-demand pricing and what is the 1- and 3-year reserved instance pricing. They procure it for themselves, so I said no more customer price sheets. This is absolutely our lowest pricing for VMs, right? So if this is the best deal going, and I'm going to show you that some of the savings, and it's for all of the series except the 3 mentioned here, so A, AV2, and G. We have 42 regions around the globe, and all the regions are eligible for reserved instances except what we call our sovereign regions, which are the US GovCloud, China, or Germany. And then today it's not currently available in CSP or open licensing. And I know there are plans for a CSP launch in 2018, so coming up, but you'll have to stay tuned on that. Down at the bottom, these tend to be what we talk to customers about, right? So why would you do this? Well, it's going to be significant savings. I'll show you here up to 82% over pay-as-you-go or on-demand pricing. Budget predictability, customers like because they know what the pricing is going to be. And then I actually can't see flexibility. I can't see. That's funny. That's covered up. That last one's covered up. From a customer perspective, this is the communication they got on the right side. And you can see here it's the lowest price. I'm going to talk a lot about flexibility because that's kind of a pillar of this program. It gives the customers the ability to exchange or cancel after purchase, which any of you who are familiar with our Compute Prepurchase realize that it was terribly inflexible and customers didn't have the ability to make any changes. All right, so one of the pillars of flexibility is exchange. And so customers, for example, when they purchase an RI, they're going to specify the VM type, the region, and the term. So as an example, they might pick a D2 in US East, which is the region, for a 1-year term. And they'll procure that. If they change, their requirements change and they need to go to a different region or go to a different machine type, they can do that, and we're going to give them a prorated credit. It's a straight proration. There's no front-end loading, no funny business. A straight proration based on the months used, which they can then apply to the purchase of a new reserved instance of any machine size, any VM family, size, or region. And it can be, they can even change the term. Right? So the simple example is they purchase an RI for $1,200 for 12 months. They use it for 6 months. They would have $600 of value left that they can then apply to any other reserved instance. The only requirement is that the new reserved instance has to be an equal or greater value. And so there's not going to be any credits given back here, or we're not writing them a check back. It technically could be a smaller machine, though. It doesn't have to be a larger machine based on how much time's left. So that's exchange. If they're, let's say their company is constricted, or they've eliminated a workload and they don't have any other new workloads, they can cancel the reserved instance completely. At any time during the term, they'll get a prorated refund less 12%. And we're applying a $50,000 cap per year on this because we don't want customers to game the system and just put everything under reserved instances only to come back and cancel later. But we realize that requirements change. And then the last kind of pillar of flexibility is in the past with compute pre-purchase, it was applied at or assigned at an enrollment level. So if you take a big organization, they might have multiple divisions. And the challenge with this approach was, well, what if just this one division used their budget to pay for these, what was then compute pre-purchase? So now we give customers the option. They can assign it either at the top level at the enrollment level, so that any VMs of that size could pick up and use that if it's available, or they can narrowly assign it to a subscription. This is especially valuable either a department budget pays for it or a project budget pays for it, and they can align that reserved instance with the subscription so only those VMs benefit from it. Right. This is I talked a little bit about the purchase experience. This is in the portal where customers would go in, and again, they're going to select region, VM size, quantity, and term. What you'll notice is missing from here is operating system, because our reserved instance programs are operating system independent. They don't have to choose the operating system, and the operating system, if there are charges, is billed separately. The beauty of this is, one, there's fewer choices, and two, greater flexibility for customers. So if a customer starts with, let's just say, a Windows VM that they're paying for the Windows license, they can migrate to covering those Windows licenses with a hybrid use benefit, which we'll talk about in a minute, and it's the same reserved instance. This is a kind of a summary of some of the savings that customers can see with reserved instances. The first two, the first two columns in the yellow, these are just straight reserved instance savings compared to on-demand pricing. So a DV2, a customer purchases a 1-year reserved instance, and they can save typically 44% against on-demand pricing. If they purchase a 3-year, they're going to save 63% against on-demand pricing. The two blue columns to the right are when you add in the hybrid use benefit. And I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'll cover it briefly. So the hybrid use benefit is a benefit unique to Azure, which essentially says customers that have volume license contracts where they've licensed products from us, like Windows Server, can bring those to Azure and leverage those so they don't have to pay Windows Server license costs in Azure. Now, again, this is only in Azure, so this doesn't work in other clouds, Google, Oracle, AWS, for example. But you can see the savings here can be very dramatic, right? So it takes the 1 year from, in the case of a DV2, from 44% to the 66 to 72 range, and the 3 years up to 82%. Right, so customers can customers can leverage these two programs, hybrid use benefit and reserved instances, together to save up to 82%. I mean, this is amazing. You're gonna get 5 VMs for the price of 1 by leveraging these programs. So this is this is an example. So this happens to be a D3 V2. This is one of the particular Windows VMs in US West 2. On-demand pricing is $4,300. This is a year. If they just use reserved instances, they'd save 37% and get that down to almost $2,700. But if they combine reserved instances and hub, they can save 72%. And that's taking into consideration the software assurance on the Windows license, which is the small green block. Compared to compute pre-purchase, if you were familiar with that, compute pre-purchase was hours, right? And so first off, customers had to choose the VM instance, the data center region, and the operating system. So it was operating system specific, meaning if they chose Windows, they couldn't have migrated to Hub within that term. And it was a bank of hours, whereas reserved instances, so less specific, it's 1 or 3 year term, less specific with the operating system, and we give the post-purchase options there that we talked about: exchange, cancel, and assign. So customers that have compute pre-purchase, customers that purchase CPP, Certainly those are still valid, but we're going to phase that out. We're going to retire that program after December 31st, so no new purchases of CPP. I did want to mention, if you go to Azure.com and you look at the pricing tool, and hey Jeff, is my video frozen?
No, you look good.
Is it moving?
It's following you, and you're doing great. So keep
okay,
up. And
great.
Just open up in your local viewer.
It's not. I was going to say it's frozen on my local viewer. So if you go to the pricing tool, I did want to point out a couple things. So, and again, this is open to everyone. You can go there now. What you'll see here is the hub option, so hybrid use benefit. And I think we've taken use out of it, so now just hybrid benefit for Windows. So if you select the Windows operating system here on the first line, it's going to prompt you to say, do you want to save up to 40% for the hybrid benefit? And you can. And then down here, you select the instance, and then at the bottom on the left, you can choose pay-as-you-go 1 year or 3 year reserved pricing. So you can just toggle through and see all the prices right there. And then on the right, I did want to point out, though, that this just displays a constant monthly cost. And this is very helpful because as you toggle through these choices, pay-as-you-go 1 year or 3 year, you can see the relative comparative costs. But keep in mind that the 1 and 3 year reserved instances are billed up front. So you'd need to multiply those times 12 or 36 to know, okay, here's the impact in my on my budget, so to speak. I did want, if I think there may be some resellers on the line, so I did want to point out that reserved instances, the term of coverage for reserved instances is completely independent of the enrollment. So a customer, and I'll just use an example, customer could be on a calendar year contract year. So a January through December contract year. And as a matter of fact, so we have 15 days left in their contract year. At any time during that period, they can purchase reserved instances, and those are independent of their contract year. This is particularly interesting this time of year because as we get to December, if you had a customer, an EA customer that had made a monetary commitment, and if they had any balance, they can use that to purchase reserved instances now. They don't have to let that go to waste because that will expire. So if you have any, and I say December or Q1 anniversaries where you have customers with a Azure monetary commitment that maybe they've mentioned they've not used all of, they can use it and buy 12 or 36 month reserved instances. It's a great way to take advantage of that. I did want to talk a little bit about AWS. To be fair, AWS had the name reserved instances first. For the last 18 months, when I've been talking about compute pre-purchase, I pretty much said it's our reserved instance program, but now we just call ours reserved instances. They actually have two programs. They have a standard program and a convertible program. Their standard program is pretty rigid, I would say inflexible. Their convertible program is more flexible, and you can see we've geared ours from a pricing perspective to we're trying to offer the flexibility of their convertible at the price of their standard. And there's comparison over here to the right, and you can see that compared to their convertible, I mean, there's really no comparison to standard because their standard doesn't really let you change anything. It doesn't let you change VM, family, or region. It doesn't let you cancel. You can sell it for what feedback is pennies on the dollar in the marketplace, and they only let you change the VM size with Linux. Their convertible program is much more flexible. They let you change the VM size both with Linux and Windows, and the VM family. They still don't let you change the region, right? And then you can see we're what I believe to be giving you the ultimate flexibility, letting you change any of these attributes, which again all just lead to customers can fully leverage this as their requirements change. And you know we're about 16% less in cost than the convertible RIs. But again, when you add the hybrid use benefit, now you start to see dramatic savings. And again, hybrid use benefit is a Azure only benefit. So if you have customers, the net of this is these machines are comparable. So an E4 V3 is a comparable machine, memory, processors, cores, etc., to their R4 extra large. And in these circumstances, a Windows machine, there's just no better value for a Windows machine. It's going to be 64% less than the AWS 3-year reserved instance. And again, apples to apples comparison on the equipment. And that's my presentation. I was trying to leave 7 or 8 minutes here for questions. And
great. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to unmute the audience here. So if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask away. And looking at the IM window, Ernest, CSP availability through CSP is coming in 2018. Brian, please take note in our Yammer group. We'll make sure you have the link to our YouTube channel there.
I see a question on SQL with hybrid benefit. The answer that I've heard is coming soon. I don't have a date, but yes, there's discussion that the hybrid benefit is coming for SQL. How does the customer pay for Windows if they don't have AUB? So today, if a customer goes in and spins up a Windows VM in Azure, it will ask them if they have a hybrid use benefit, but if they don't, then they just get charged based on actual usage, and those are per minute charges. So very similar to other clouds. And in fact, if you look at the pricing for renting the Windows licenses, you'll see that I call it airline pricing, right? It's the same, 5 airlines, it's the same fare from New York to Chicago. It's the same if you get comparable machine sizes in comparable regions, the pricing is remarkably similar.
Great. Anyone have any questions that they want to ask directly versus the IM window?
Thanks, Jeff and team. Nice presentation.
Is this helpful?
To me, very. Puts it in perspective a lot better. This is a financial transaction.
It certainly is. Yep. And if a customer is using this, and I think the break even may be like in the 60%. So it doesn't even have to be a full-time machine. There's a break even point where even if it's a part-time machine, it makes more sense to go with this model.
Does Cloudin call out at all if you should move to an RI or take advantage of AHUB?
We're starting to see some of that. I think certainly Cloudin can provide you the data on usage that'll support that decision. I don't think it's there specifically as, and I'm going to say the easy button that says, oh, flashing light, you should move this to an RI. But certainly it provides a lot of the data as can be the basis for your analysis. Good question.
We have a few minutes left. Are there any others? So Brian asks, how is an existing VM moved to an RI? Rob, you want to take that one? All right. So Brian, it's actually not moved. We're really just changing the financial model. We're not actually moving it to a separate or different implementation of Azure or different cloud or anything like that. The VM is the VM wherever it rests. We're just changing the pricing behind it.
Sorry, I got dropped. What was the question?
The question, I answered it, but how is an existing VM moved to an RI? Well, I explained it's not moved. We're really just changing the pricing model.
That's right.
All right, but then a follow-up question is, but how does that occur?
So a customer procures reserved instances. They choose whether they want to assign them at the, as I said before, at the enrollment level, which is kind of the top level, or at a specific subscription. And then behind the scenes, basically Azure does the matching. If you buy a D4 reserved instance, and if you, and I'll just say you selected this subscription, we look for a D4 in there, and we attach to that, and that gets that low rate. And if you power off that VM, then we look for another active D4 to apply that rate to, so that you're always, we want you to benefit from it. So we're actively looking, and even if you turn down a machine, we'll go find one to apply it to within either, again, narrowly that subscription, if you narrow it to the subscription, or at the enrollment level, which could look across all your subscriptions.
Very good point.
If I had an active D4 with pay-as-you-go, and then I buy RIs for D4, will it auto-apply? Let me restate it because I think the answer is yes. Yes. So if you have a D4 today and you're rolling along pay-as-you-go, if you buy a reserved instance for a D4, yes, it's automatically going to apply to that existing one.
You're just going to pay for the year or the 3 years right then and there, correct?
That's correct. Yep. And one thing I would suggest is, and you mentioned D4, and it's a great example. I encourage customers, the D models, for example, the D series. We have the original D series. We have DV2s and DV3s. And I encourage people, certainly before you buy a 3-year reserved instance, evaluate if it makes sense to upgrade to a newer machine, because the newer machines tend to be faster and in some cases even cheaper. When we came out with the DV2s, I think they were 27% faster and they were 5% cheaper. So I typically suggest do some house cleaning. Oftentimes that's just a reboot where you select a new machine size and then reboot it, but do some house cleaning before you purchase a bunch of RIs.
That's great advice. All right, last call before we adjourn today's session. All right, sounds like we've got everyone covered. Rob, thanks for your time and attention today. I appreciate you investing into our community. I thank everyone for being on our call. As I mentioned earlier, we'll get this posted to our YouTube channel and to our Yammer group probably early next week. It takes a little bit of time to get that through the processing channel. So thank you, everyone, and we'll certainly be in touch, and thank you for being part of the community. Appreciate your time, everyone. Bye-bye.